Okay, moving forward in understanding communication for the Shelton State Oral Communication class. I'm going to go to what is your chapter 10, although it may be shuffled around. A lot of the information will still be the same. I'm going to go to chapter 10, communicating in groups and teams, and get this done. The nature of groups and teams. What is a group typically? We think of it as a group of people from 3 to about 13, 14 in that area who are brought together specifically for a purpose, such as problem solving or whatever it might be. There's an interaction that has to take place. There has to be a certain level of interdependence. A certain amount of time takes place, a certain number of meetings in time, a certain size. And again, 3 out to about 13, 14. Some books go as high as 17, 18. I think that's a little more public meeting than group. Now, what makes a group a team? Well, there are clear and shared and inspiring shared goals, a results driven structure, competent team members, people who are working, getting the job done. Unified commitment makes a group a team, and a collaborative climate. There are standards of excellence. There's external support and recognition at times. There should be principled leadership that makes a group a team. And if you talk about building an effective team online, you want to encourage socializing, strive for face time, allow and encourage side channels, and make your expectations clear. Then, in addition, provide training as necessary. There, of course, that's talking about virtual groups, goals of groups and their members, group goals. By the way, this book was written quite a few years back before all of this stuff came along with Zoom and all the things going along on with it with COVID and the group meetings. Goals of groups and their members. There are group goals, and that's appropriate. That is something to have. And there are individual goals, and that's appropriate as well. However, it is when the individual goals conflict with the group goals and the individual decides to pursue their individual goal ahead of the group goal, we start talking about people having a hidden agenda. They're not really trying to help the group. Talks about getting slackers to do their share. You want to match the goals to the group size so that you don't have a goal that's unreasonable for the group. Focus on the end. Why are we here? What is it we really want to accomplish? Try to establish clear goals and responsibilities for everybody. Make sure that people are trained to do what it is that they're going to be asked to do, provide training. Hold people accountable. Okay, let's get this done and then get this done. And have a thing where people answer for whether they did or did not get it done. Focus on quality. If people are falling behind, ask them why, not in an aggressive way, but maybe they need more resources or more help. So check and find out why people are falling behind. Don't overlook poor performance. Try to encourage everybody to pull their weight. You want to also guard against burnout. Don't ask one person to do too much or one person to do too many things in a row. And a big thing to do to helping everybody to do this here really is to celebrate success. Some characteristics of groups and teams. One are rules. These are the guidelines of how the group is going to be conducted. Another is norms. There are social norms, just sort of how we socially do things. Procedural norms, they guide the operations and the decision making. And there are task norms, which govern how members get their job done. So different patterns of interaction exist within any group. And it talks about all channel network. Everybody can talk to everybody. There's a wheel network. There's one person in the center, and then everyone's communicating with that one person in the center. That person becomes a gatekeeper. There's a chain network where one person is responsible for passing along to another. That person is responsible for passing along to another. There are different roles that we play. Now, the thing about this, here's the part of this chapter I want you to focus on. When you go to this chapter, look for functional roles of group members, and look for those and go over those, and look for the dysfunctional roles of group members. I will tell you this, when you're in a group on the job, you want to be fill a functional role as a group member. You can be, it talks about some of these are very obvious: initiator, contributor, information seeker, going down through the list, an energizer, someone who's helping out. On the social maintenance roles, which is a functional roles as well, you can be a supporter or encourager, someone who's an harmonizer. You might be a gatekeeper trying to get everybody involved. Typically, that's whoever the leader of the group is, but that's something you can do. But here's the important part when I say looking forward into your future career. You don't want to fill a dysfunctional role in any group you're in, let alone every group you're in, because sometimes people fall into sort of like a habit of how they interact. And if it's dysfunctional, that's problematic. If you are constantly filling a dysfunctional role, it talks about a blocker who interferes with the progress of the group, it talks about aggressors who struggle for status by deflating the status of other people. People who deserve. They so with, maybe someone didn't like their idea, so they sound like fold their arms, they lean back in the chair, and they're just kind of looking around the room, not really involved anymore in the group or helping the group out. They've deserted the group emotionally. Dominators interrupt and bark on long monologues. Sometimes people are recognition seekers. They boast about things that they've done, trying to get someone to validate them. Jokers display a lack of involvement through inappropriate humor or horseplay. And then the cynics discount the chances for group success. I will tell you this now. Any dysfunctional role that you play it long enough, and whatever company you're working for will find a way to lay you off. So, well, Tom or Susan, or doesn't matter who it is, male or female, they call you in and say, well, the company's decided it no longer needs an equipment manager, so we're going to have to lay you off. And we really enjoyed working here, all this other good stuff, blah, 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 bye-bye. Then when they advertise for someone to fill your place, they're going to advertise for an equipment coordinator. But they're going to make sure there's a qualification in there that you don't have. They know your resume, and you won't be able to apply for it if you don't have that qualification. Don't fill a dysfunctional role in a group. It's very important. And working in groups, look for unfulfilled roles that need to be filled. Avoid role fixation. Don't think you have control of a role and no one can do that role. That can be problematic as well. Talks about leadership and communication. There are various ways to think about leadership, understanding it. There are trait theories where they look at various traits that people have that make them into a leader. There are situational leaders, people who happen to be good listeners. They're open to innovation. They work well. And good at facilitating change. They appreciate diversity. They're honest and ethical. Sometimes in that situation, you'll have a leader that just emerges and becomes a leader, whether they're supposed to be or not. Various leadership styles that people will have. Authoritarian, here's what we're going to do. That can work in certain groups. Democratic, well, listen, why don't we all decide together what it is we're going to do? Or laissez-faire, it says. Essentially, everybody do what you want to do, and let's get the job done. And then the final one is a fourth style is called servant leadership. The idea is that the leader is there for servant. And I'll tell you, this is an important thing, especially if you are in a church of any kind, really. In the Christian community, all too often we've had leaders who were authoritarian. And they were authoritarian to the point that you could tell that there were egos involved. I don't know if you've ever had a church elder in a church yell and scream at you. I have. Not pleasant. But when people are in a leadership role of a church for their own ego, for the sake of power, for the sake of validation, it in my opinion, in terms of Christian leadership, it doesn't fit with the whole idea of being Christian. Anyway, just my opinion. Servant leadership, really, if you look through, and again, this is just from a Christian perspective. And there are other religions, I understand, but and many of those the same thing. They talk about, some of those others talk about servant leadership as well. Dimensions of leadership, balancing task and relational goals. Be careful on that. There's talks about different kinds of leadership that can be problematic. I'm not going to go through all of those. You can look through those. Becoming a leader, there are emergent leaders. Sometimes there are designated leaders, people who are just designated. And when I do group meetings in class, I typically have the group pick a leader, and I do it immediately. Going forward now, talks about followership and communication. There are different types of followers. Isolates are indifferent to the overall goals of the group. Bystanders, they know what's going on, but they sort of hang back and watch rather than be active. Participants try to have an impact. And that's the best kind of group member you can have, really, one of the best kinds. Activists are even more energetic and passionate, engaged than just participants. They're trying to change things and get things done. Diehards are sometimes literally sacrifice themselves for the cause. But the power of followers. There's different kinds of power. There's legitimate power, where someone is designated the leader and asked to be the leader, the supervisor possibly. There are nominal leaders, a person who's officially designated as being in charge of a group. Sometimes people become leaders because of different powers that they have. One is expert power. Someone knows a lot about the topic. Typically, we look to them for leadership if they know a lot about a topic, and that's what our group's trying to do. Sometimes there's connection power. Someone's connected to someone, and because of that, they're looked to as a leader. Reward power exists when others are influenced by the granting of rewards. If someone has the ability to grant rewards to other people, sometimes they become leaders because they are able to help other people out, and people then look to them. Coercive power. If you don't, do this or that, I have the ability. If the boss is in the group, typically the boss is the leader because the boss can fire you. So there's coercive power. Referent power. That's really just from being the person can have the power because they're liked, respected, and trusted. One thing that you have to remember, though, in terms of group leadership, in any kind of group, power is group centered. Even in a dictatorship, and we realize there are a billion, people in China, and we tend to think of and it does seem to be somewhat of a dictatorship. The Communist Party elects a leader, and when you do an election and 99% of people vote for the same person, one tends to say, well, that's not, first of all, it would never happen if people generally spoke their minds and voted in a way where they got to speak their minds. You're not going to have 99% of, one person get 99% of the vote. It just doesn't happen. But even in that situation, heads of countries have to realize that the power is in the hands of the people all too often. There have been many dictators. Many of those dictators have been overthrown by the power of the people. If 1 billion Chinese people decide, guess what? We're going to have a new form of government. I have news for you. No matter how many men are in the army, they're going to have a new form of government. So anyway, power is group centered. It is often distributed, although not always, among the group members, not necessarily equally, but distributed to some extent. It's not an either or concept. It's not you either do or don't have power. Everybody has a little bit, even if it's the power to lead the group. And that does happen as well. And that is the end of chapter 10. And I'll work on getting this posted and get to the next chapter.